Welcome to Shares Who, your top spot for politics. Now, this channel is at 210 subscribers, persistently growing, and all of that I'm going to thank you guys for watching even now my little short videos that I'm doing on this channel. And I need your help to make this grow even more. So this video tonight, like it, share it around to your friends, especially in Virginia's 5th District friends. Comment on this video, ask questions on this video, and most importantly, subscribe to the Shazu channel. Now, what I want to do is point out that which gets the show going, starting with, of course, let me go over to media assets here, the Dissent Agenda, which is a podcast run by Melissa Lucasen and Cody Connor, based out of here in Virginia Beach. And they focus a lot on national and local politics, too. I encourage you to subscribe to their channel as well. They help me out because they're providing the StreamYard account for me to be able to do my show. So I encourage you to go watch their show. Now, for insurance purposes in Hampton Roads, Farley Perkins can help you out. Good friend, helps me out with my insurance needs. So look for Mr. Farley Perkins to help you out there. If you're looking for some good food, either tonight or the nights ahead, look no further than Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express LLC, with multiple locations in Hampton Roads, including here in Portsmouth, where I live, and where I used to live in Virginia Beach, near Regent University. Look for Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express. Now, for dessert after that, hit up ELG Sweet Boutique here in Portsmouth on 340 High Street. And if you're looking for some good suggestions to help you out money-wise, like credit fixes, maybe tax resolutions, then my good friend, Mr. Seiko Varner, who started me on this podcasting journey all but 5 years ago, can help you out with that at Positive Vibes Incorporated. He's also a fantastic DJ if you need that. 757-932-0177. He can help you with that. He also created the Hampton Roads Green Book, which is a great application to find Black-owned businesses in Hampton Roads. And last but certainly not least, the Black Swan Mindset, The Chronicles, a podcast, both here on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Substacks, all the places you can find podcasts. Look for the Black Swan Mindset. It's run by Andrea Dixon Jesper, my awesome, talented, brilliant, lovely wife. So look for that to the best of your abilities. Now, Shazu has already done a double header for Virginia's 6th District several weeks ago. This show is going to slide over to Virginia's 5th District tonight, and our guest is Albemarle County Supervisor Mike Pruitt. Now, Mike Pruitt grew up in a blue-collar family out in the rural part of the Blue Ridge. He went to Duke with the help of a military scholarship and joined the Navy with 3 tours as a surface warfare officer. He's been involved in public service since that time, including being elected to Albemarle's County Supervisor as a seat in 2023. A graduate of UVA law, Mr. Pruitt uses his experience in housing and discrimination law to better serve his community, and he looks to do so in the House of Representatives, should he prevail in the Democratic primary this June and then run in November. And I'm going to bring him on right now. Mr. Mike Pruitt, how are you this evening, good sir?
I am doing great. Yourself?
Pretty well. It's a good work day on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Good to think about what led him to do his activism. And then those of us who still do politics these days, like you and I, good role model for that. So I want to shout that out as well. So I'm glad I was able to do good today. Hopefully you're able to do good as well.
Yes, sir. We actually started out bright and early. We headed over to an event that the United Way was putting together here in Charlottesville, putting together some kits for winter readiness for folks who are struggling. Some basic stuff to keep them warm and hygienic during these colder months, especially as we got some surprise snow that we've still been trudging through. Came out of nowhere. Kind of put a
just wait for this upcoming Saturday, Sunday. I think there's about to be another big shot of snow.
I confess, I'm built for a lot. I'm a fairly tough guy. I served 8 years in the Navy, but I am an absolute weenie when it comes to cold weather. I grew up down south, and I I can't abide it. I was struggling through the inauguration this weekend. It was
At least we're able to get to see that. Good to see the flip in Virginia state government. Yeah, speaking of Virginia, you're running in the 5th district, which I believe is compromised largely of the South Side's rural geography. And there's some Richmond suburbs in there. The Confederacy's war for slavery into there in Appomattox. Danville's there. Charlottesville, as you just pointed out. Lynchburg, all are in Virginia 5. If you can, tell us about the district. What's the character like, and what are your favorite places and groups in Virginia's 5th district?
Sure, thank you. That's an incredibly generous question. So, you mentioned this at the top, but I actually grew up in a working class community in the rural Blue Ridge in Appalachia. And when I think back on that, that was a place I didn't see a future for myself. And I had to leave on a military scholarship to be able to build my own economic path out of there. But there's still so much I loved about that community. And when I travel across this district, I see so much of that reflected in this community here. And I think one of the most striking things is just, we're right there in the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, almost the whole way down as you travel this big district that's about the size of New Hampshire, New Jersey. And, I'll be driving down because we spend a lot of time in the road when you're campaigning in this district. I'll be driving with my campaign manager, and we'll just look out over, the vista going through Nellysford or down Appomattox Courthouse. And it'll be golden hour, and you'll just say, damn, look at that. It's a beautiful country. We'll be hanging out, and we'll be getting out of an event, and there'll be a kids' little league pickup game going on. Beautiful country. It never ceases to give you the opportunity to reflect on what we're actually trying to fight for in government, right? The kind of opportunities that this country can give you, the kind of natural beauty that we all wish we had the time to sit back and reflect, the ability to spend time integrated with our local community, find joy in those small, tiny moments that can sometimes feel out of touch and hard to get to when people are struggling with bills, when people are struggling with their health care and not being able to get the kind of care they need. And I think this district does such an amazing job of reminding you what you're fighting for every day.
Great. Now, we touched on in your bio and you a couple of times about the Navy, and after the military and UVA law, you ran for Albemarle County Supervisor. So, in terms of local government, what has that shown you over 3 years, and is it giving you a boost of experience going into this campaign for a federal office?
I think 100%. Local government is, I tell people all the time, it's what we want government to do. You actually have, your representative is accessible. Everyone who I represent lives within a half-hour drive of me. It's pretty well advertised where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be speaking legislatively. And it's pretty easy to come and find me and give me a piece of your mind if you want to. My direct personal phone number is available on our county website for people to tell me exactly how they believe. Now, that can be a little intimidating, but it's important, right? Like, I can't take an action that I think might tick off a whole neighborhood, because one whole neighborhood might be enough for me to lose my seat. I need to make sure I'm actually listening to my community members, because their weight, the weight of their voice actually means something on an individual level in a community this tight. And also, we work together really well. There's 5 other members on our board, and we all vote in the same party. But boy, howdy, there's a lot of political difference in how we might engage with a given issue. That being said, we actually sit there and we take issues very deeply seriously. Just last Wednesday, there was by all accounts, a fairly minor land use decision. It was about how and whether we were going to allow this little 1-acre parcel to fill in a bit more land in an area that's partially floodplain. And we spent over an hour sitting there and discussing the merits of this. And there were some very passionate thoughts on it. But every supervisor came down. They articulated why they were standing by the position they were. We counted our votes. We tried to persuade each other, and we came out with a decision that left, I know, some constituents happy and some constituents not, but everyone understood where their representative stood, and also understood that they were making a decision that they thought was in the best interest of the community. I think that is such a great reflection of what we could be doing at the federal level.
And I, as just someone who has been in the citizenry in multiple Virginia districts, I would also second the idea that we would sort of want our congressperson in the House of Representatives to be a little more receptive to the people, meet them more, discuss with them the issues more. That is the type of representative.
Actually appear for a town hall in person, maybe once, maybe twice.
Once. A couple times perhaps. And maybe that salary might be worth it. I want to circle a little bit back to UVA.
Yeah.
This question especially will be good for my dad here, who's a big fan of UVA basketball and other UVA athletics, especially the football team, which had its first 11-win season and a bowl victory against an SEC school. How are you feeling about UVA athletics at this moment?
Now, I want to level with you in a tremendous amount of honesty, because I think people are sick of politicians who are always trying to give them the right answer. So I'm going to let you know, I'm not a huge sports guy, and that's just the truth of it. You know, I'm a UVA law alum, but I don't know that I know too much about sports outside of what the Blue Devil basketball team was up to between 09 and 13 when I was an undergrad at Duke. Out of that, my sports experience is pretty limited. I will say, you know, the infectious energy of a successful sports team really does seep throughout a community. And one thing I do love is a community. And what I really love is when we're doing well in football, frankly, my in-laws, my niece and nephew are going to come visit here a lot more often. They got season tickets, but they don't always make it out if we're not doing great. So I have really been thrilled to see how our football team's doing, because that just frankly means I get to see my family a little bit more.
Indeed. All right, let's circle a little bit back to your history, because you served in the military and you served in the Middle East. Now, this year, the past couple of years, I can count the United States having done stuff like bombing Iran, bombing Nigeria, Syria, backing the military of Israel and Saudi Arabia. And it leads me to wanting to ask someone who has experience there and then could be in Congress and handle the budget, do we need to be acting as the world police? What's your opinion on that?
Sure. So in my final year of service in the U.S. Navy, I was leading a team that specialized on Middle Eastern surface naval tactics. And, you know, through, frankly, pure happenstance, found myself a leading expert on how Iran would conduct a war at sea. Was supposed to be a not that important job, because we were supposed to be de-emphasizing Iran in our global strategy. And then this was during the first Trump presidency. Out of nowhere, he decided to bring us right up to the edge of a disastrous war with Iran. I can tell you, having been there in these rooms, having been in places where a lot of important decisions were being made, frankly, things that felt above my pay scale, but there I was. We were a stupid mistakes away from a war that would have cost thousands of lives, billions of US dollars, human souls. And it is pure dumb luck that this didn't happen. You know, you asked, the way you framed this was, should we be the world's police? And I don't think we have to be the world's police, because over generations, the entire arc of American grand strategy, the thing that men and women have laid their lives down for, has been to build a stable, precarious sometimes, tenuous, but a stable world order that helps us guarantee peace through an expectation of rules, right? A rules-based world order. That is the vision that America has been striving for. And the Trump administration is actively seeking to undermine the basics of a rules-based order. We see in our current policy toward Venezuela, and you know, I struggle to even call it policy, what we're talking about with Greenland, because it so defies just the expectations of the possible. But we see with that, not just destructive policy in this one area, but something that shows that we are thumbing our nose at the rules-based order that we helped build, this order that we helped create in order to guarantee our own safety. So it's self-destructive in addition to just degrading the things that let us be a moral leadership abroad, right? I want to believe in an America that is able to, hold a banner high. I like the idea of a city on a hill. At the end of the day, regardless of your political affiliation, you don't run for Congress if you don't actually believe that there's something special in America that gets your heart going, that makes you want to be that beacon. And I think we can't do that when we have the same foreign policy approach that we see with Russia right now, where we see a country that's a neighbor and they have something we want and we try and take it. That's what Russia does. That shouldn't be what the United States does.
Now, I want to take a second to analyze a little bit more of the current member of the 5th District's representation in the United States House of Representatives. That would be Congressman John McGuire. He's supported the big, beautiful bill from Trump. He's considered Renee Good a domestic terrorist while being interviewed, who used her vehicle as a weapon. He's been in Virginia government before as a state senator. In 2024, was the only state senator to vote no on ending child marriage in the state. And he attended Stop the Steal rallies in 2020, called COVID a pandemic, and attended January 6th. So, among other things, why would you like to beat him?
So you gave me a whole host of reasons, and I tell people this all the time. I knew every one of these things before he ever got elected to Congress, right? He already had a record. We already knew he was a radical. I was prepared to be frustrated with him. I think the way that he's surprised me and managed to still disappoint me is by also showing just what a damn coward he is. He has what he thinks right now is a safe seat, and yet he still talks to his constituents and tells them what he thinks they want to hear him say, rather than just standing in his own truth. He said right after getting elected that, I'm not trying to threaten Medicare or Medicaid. Donald Trump's plan isn't to threaten or kick people off Medicare and Medicaid. Then he voted to do just that, to cut trillions from our health system. He stood up in front of Southside communities. He said, I'm not trying to do anything to threaten the uranium mining moratorium that keeps Pittsylvania County's farmland safe. And then he literally, the second bill he brought in his first month in Congress, helps Donald Trump do just that, helps fast track uranium mining. He says over and over, this is something that I know my constituents here in the 5th District recognize. Every time he does one of his telephone town halls, he loves to say over and over, I love you. He loves to say, Democrat or Republican, black or white, know that I love you. And I just don't think you can tell someone that you love them when you're voting to kick their spouse off their federal job, when you're threatening their parents and their grandparents' retirement, when you're literally taking food off of their children's plates at school. I want a congressman who is, at the very least, willing to cowboy up and say what they mean, right? John McGuire believes that, maybe there's some people who deserve access to healthcare, but there's other people he thinks deserve to die from treatable diseases. There might be some people who deserve fertile farmland, but there's other people who deserve a radioactive pit in their backyard. And there's some people who might deserve to be loved. I'm sure he loves people, but there's other people he wants to see disappeared. Right? John McGuire is, at the end of the day, he is a stuffed shirt who is dragged around so easily by the nose, by committee leadership, by caucus leadership, and frankly, by big businesses. There's not another explanation for his uranium mining bill. Someone comes to him with a bill and he's like, this sounds reasonable, doesn't ask any questions, and moves forward, right? He's fundamentally, I think this is the most damning thing, he's a cheap date. Mm-hmm. He does not even ask for much for his vote to be given away, because he's not a legislator. He's not interested in going to Congress to legislate. He is excited because he is a fan, right? He is excited to be invited to the set of his favorite show and meet all his favorite cast members on the reality TV show. He wants to shake hands with Eric Trump. He wants to be part of it all. He wants to be on the set. He doesn't have much of a vision beyond that.
Sounds like a bit of a rubber stamp from
Yes.
the top on down. Now, that's his vision, which seems a little bit lacking, to say the least. Your vision, which, if you give me a second here, I'm going to highlight by highlighting the issues page here on the website. And for the viewers, this is mikepruitt.com, and I have it on the issues section. Good gamut of topics right here and your positions on that. So I do encourage people to go to mikepruitt.com for that as well. But highlight a little bit more about your opinions, say the economy, perhaps restructuring it so billionaires aren't throwing us deep into another Gilded Age. Personally, how would you structure the tax system in this country?
Excellent question. And this, I think, has to be, it's sometimes unsexy, right? People don't get riled up in, ooh, tax policy. But the truth is, we are at this moment, we have a bigger gulf between the rich and the poor in this country than we have seen in over 100 years. I'm not sure there's a person alive in the 5th Congressional District who has seen this level of inequality. And I'm also so frustrated with my own party sometimes, because I feel like Democrats have forgotten what it means to dream big, to have a big vision of policy. And I think, this is, again, unsexy might be one of the words for it, but we privilege in our tax code the gains that are made from non-productive activity. That's a gross way to say it, but I think a better way to say it is every day, the value of a dollar held by a banker or an investor on Wall Street goes up while your wage stays the same. So that gulf is wider than it's been in 100 years, and every day it gets bigger because they're earning faster and more, and you're earning the same. There's a lot of ways we can course correct for that, but one of the very first ones is there is no good defensible reason I see that capital gains continue to be taxed separately and preferentially to wages. Capital gains are a type of wage, and we should treat them the same, and I think that will do a significant part of this. But also, I think we need to revisit our tax system writ large. It is chock-a-block full of loopholes and exemptions that any person with enough clout and enough lawyers on their payroll are going to be able to dash through and get around. I think we need higher tax brackets for people who have like CEO level income. And, this is a big one, but we talked about this really earnestly back in 2020 when we were actually trying to cast a new vision for a party because we were in a presidential election year, and people got really excited about a wealth tax, something that would fall on these highest earners, these billionaires, and could generate a tremendous amount of new income. I'll be, frank, wealth taxes are hard to work, right? It's hard to actually make them work. But I believe we've got a lot of talent in our government. When we actually have a DOJ where we're not trying to purge people for not following orders, there's a tremendous amount of talent in that organization. I believe that this country can develop a wealth tax that is cleverer than any team of lawyers that a billionaire can put together. And I think that would be an important way that we could try and start re-leveling that playing field.
A couple of follow-ups on that exact topic. Recently in the news, Gavin Newsom turned down, it's been active against creating a wealth tax in California, which I think was going to be a one-time 5%. And that as someone who's a bit more of the progressive bend, it would be a little bit disheartening to see Gavin do that. And I'm also curious your opinion on the current structure of the payroll tax and whether or not it might be a good idea to remove the cap from that.
Sure. Oh, excellent questions. So first off, I think I understand why Gavin's doing what he's doing, even if I can't stand it. Like, I can understand it even if I can't stand it, right? As a leader at a state or local level, you always feel like you're in a race against every other state, right? You're trying to attract that company. You're trying to attract that new thing, right? And this comes up in local government, right? We're always being asked to do new business development incentives to try and attract people. And Gavin's probably scared that his wealth tax that his legislature wants to proceed with could make it so that California would struggle to attract business. The thing I would say is, Gavin, at the end of the day, California's still going to be California. There's only one Hollywood. And I think this, that argument is only amplified when we're looking at the power of the US Congress and the entire country, right? Nothing is going to make America stop being America. We are going to remain the world's financial hub. We are going to remain the biggest concentration of GDP and wealth in the world. I don't think a tiny wealth tax that's going to affect a countable number of people is going to upend that. What it will do is help make this a more just country. And you also mentioned the payroll tax, 100%, right? Every time we quake in our boots over the insolvency of Social Security, over the possibility of making it so that people have to wait even longer to retire, right? Like my dad has spent over 40 years working a very physical and demanding job in a plant. His father before him died before he was ever able to earn his retirement after working an incredibly demanding job in a textile mill. We don't need to be talking about pushing that retirement age back further for working class people. We need to instead be talking about what is it going to take to make it so that we are continuing to tax Elon Musk's payroll for more than the first 5 seconds of the year, because that's the time it takes him to meet his max deductions on Social Security. I think that's a very clear and direct answer, and something that I think almost every American would be able to get behind.
I'd like it too. You really want to help out housing prices, housing support for all of the citizens of Virginia's 5th. Why would you like to, and how would you like to?
Sure. So I think we touched on this in the very brief bio, but I work as a housing lawyer. This was a decision I made as I was getting toward the end of my time in the Navy. I was like, I need to pivot into a new career, because as much as I love the work I'm doing for Uncle Sam, I also don't like Uncle Sam moving me every 2 years. And I look back at my own experience. I had been a tenant for the first time by myself at 21 when I joined the Navy. And I had my landlord sue me illegally for months of rent that I didn't live there. They actually served me while I was deployed, came over on an MH-60 helicopter to serve me process. The gulf in power between landlords and tenants is always going to be extraordinary. And also, we see every day as we walk down the street the scars of enduring residential segregation in our communities. I think this is, and especially, acute, we should be thinking about this here on MLK Day, really one of the main architects of the Fair Housing Act. And you'll apologize, my dog is always a pest. She's in the background hollering at me. I
have 3 cats in this room right now.
But I imagine they scream a little quieter. Joe, she's all 85 pounds and crotchety. So she's got a big voice, even though she's a sweetheart. So sorry. That's why I care about housing, right? Because it touches everyone. It's something I feel a calling toward. It's something that I think we're in a crisis for. It's honestly a big part of what brought me to run for local office, because I saw a community that I didn't think was fully living its values and acknowledging the depth of the crisis that it was in. To actually fix it, right? Housing is, I say all the time, it's not a complicated problem. You don't need to get too clever with the solutions, but you do need to actually work hard toward them. So I think there's a few different elements of it, because there isn't a single silver bullet. There's supply side, what we might call your YIMBY people. They'll talk all the time about the need to make sure that we're not increasing the cost of building new housing, that we're setting up the environment so that we can actually build more housing to house a growing community. And I agree with that. I think the powers of the federal government on that hand are a little bit more limited, but they do have real ones, right? We have the ability, we have federal government representatives who sit on the ICC that makes the standard building codes. We have, with the federal government, the ability to provide technical assistance, right? A lot of local governments, their staffs are going to be small. They don't have the capacity to sit there and be like, oh, what's it going to take to make it sure that we have a zoning code that's designed to actually build housing at the scale we need. That being said, there's also, I think, things that are less in the current zeitgeist that are really, really essential for us to engage with on housing. And a big part of that is the growth of corporate power and how that is really, really driving up costs. You have powerful regional developers that, because the way we do housing finance, are able to really control prices within their regions. They get to essentially name the price for new construction single-family home builds. They have significant premiums that they can exert in multifamilies. We have seen recently the growing threat of algorithms and AI and how they're able to outpace regular humans in their ability to control the market. When you add to that the small number of actors in the multifamily space, it makes it so that there's massive price increases. That's why this is something I've been really dedicated against in my career. I worked with members of our General Assembly to try and actually draft a law to combat this here in Virginia. And we also need to definitely get private equity, big corporations, big money out of the process of trying to outbid first-time home buyers. This is something that we see all the time. There are some communities in this country where private equity owns more than a third of single-family homes because they're trying to find a good value. They're trying to outcompete. They're trying to blockbust. This is unconscionable. It's something I think we actually have bipartisan support for, right? At the end of the day, no one, red or blue, wants to see billionaires driving their sons and daughters out of their homes. That's what we see on the ground every day. And then the last one, this is something that frustrates me sometimes, because again, it gets back to, I feel like our own party losing the ability to dream big and imagine real solutions, which is right now, almost every major housing investment tool we use is market driven. Senator Mark Warner, I disagree with him on some things, but he's brilliant on housing finance and how to do it. And he is one of the main leaders in the Senate. But I once sat there and asked him, what are we doing about making it so that we're actually doing social housing in this country, actually investing in social housing? And he looked at me and he didn't know what I was talking about and was quite frank about that. I think that's really damning. I think we need, because if we look at a market-based solution for everything, that might work fine here in Charlottesville, right? We've got a high demand housing market here in Charlottesville. But my district also has, we also have Bremo Bluff, right? No amount of LIHTC credits are going to make a development in Bremo Bluff attractive. We need to actually be in the business of trying to provide a roof over people's head, because there are places that the market won't reach. There's problems of scale that the market won't solve. There are communities where you won't get affordable housing unless you have the government stepping in and trying to build it itself. We used to know how to do this in this country. We used to have the vision for how to do this in this country. And damn, if they don't have the vision to do it in almost every other developed country in the world, this needs to be a core part of a future vision for housing in America.
You have fought big businesses and their interests in court. You would like to even the playing field in Congress, from the people to big business. What will you stand up for on that realm?
Yeah, so this is a huge realm. We've already talked about a lot of it. We've talked about how big businesses are really putting the pins to you in housing. We've talked about how they're manipulating a vulnerable tax code to their whim. I think this is a great opportunity to talk about the rising power of tech in this country. And specifically, this district is identified by a lot of developers as a sacrifice zone in the race for AI. We currently build most data centers in Northern Virginia. That's because it's close to that big intercontinental fiber, and also it was attractive for that reason. However, the prices in Northern Virginia for land are going up. It doesn't make financial sense for these data centers to open there anymore. And on top of that, your local governments have started getting really frustrated with what they're getting out of that bargain, and they're starting to close the doors on them. That's driving this data center push further south. Here in my district, in the 5th district, we have cheap land. We are still on a lot of that same fiber backbone. So we've still got the proximity that they need to that big fiber cable crossing the Atlantic. And then on top of that, we have local governments that are struggling, right? We have a lot of places where we don't have strong job markets, and the local governments, they don't want to tax their citizens. They want to still provide services. And they're like, hey, here's a way out, and we're desperate. Because of that desperation, we're an easy mark for a thing that's ultimately going to be used to drive up people's costs. Data centers, they destroy the natural environment. They require expensive water impoundment projects, because you need a lot more water than a lot of these communities are able to put together. They need to pool together the big capital investment project just to get them off the starting blocks. And then on top of that, once they come into town, they need so much more power. You need to invest to upgrade the electrical grid. That gets passed down to ratepayers. If they're going to also, provide their power using natural gas, which is very likely because we've got a strong natural gas lobby that wants to see that happen. If they're going to provide it with natural gas, then Dominion or Appalachian Power, they get to push the change in gas prices on down to their ratepayer. So that's just one extra way that new power generation demand gets pushed down to ratepayers. And then we're saying all this about how it's going to drive up your costs locally, but let's also remember what the heck these data centers are even doing. You've got millions of computers in every data center, each of them sitting there dreaming up a way to put you or your son and daughter out of a job. The ultimate goal of all of them is to figure out how to automate the human experience out of things. I think, a lot of this is local land use. I'm not going to pretend it ain't, but there is a really critical role for Congress. I truly believe we are in a bubble right now. I think there is a pop. I think there is going to be a moment where we don't actually see the level of viability and utility that we're hoping out of AI. I think it's really critical that Congress step in and they start putting guardrails on this, right? So that we stop having this kind of insane overinvestment in AI that can't really live out its expectations. Because the truth is most people do have fundamental moral intuitions about what AI should be doing. And the law should be about taking people's moral beliefs and putting that into power. Most people think, oh yeah, maybe it's okay if AI helps me, edit a spreadsheet. That's something I could benefit from it. But maybe it's not okay if it's putting my neighbor who's a truck driver out of his job. Maybe it's not okay if it's stealing art from my friend who's an illustrator. We can take those moral intuitions and we can make them law. We just have a Congress that's too cowardly about it, or a Congress that frankly doesn't know what the heck we're talking about when we're talking about AI.
And not only that, they seemingly don't even want to attempt to try to regulate AI. If I recall, the Big Beautiful Bill put forth like a 10-year prohibition on even individual states being able to regulate AI. And I think John McGuire is one of those who provided a vote on that. And he also helped, unfortunately, gut Medicaid. So on the topic of healthcare, which probably also has its future AI problems in the future, what do you want to do for U.S. healthcare, especially for folks in the fifth?
Sure. I think this is a huge question. I think it's something we got to take in two parts. First step has to be we have to hold what we've got, right? We have a system that works for a lot of people, and it's held together with sticks and glue, but it's working for some people. It's keeping people alive, and that's fundamentally critical. John McGuire's voted on cuts are going to ultimately result in the shuttering of a rural hospital down in our South Side. It's ultimately going to result in probably around 35,000 people in Virginia's 5th Congressional District losing their health insurance because of how we did Medicaid expansion. It's going to make the state have to front a lot of funds to fill in that gap too. This is something I'm really worried about with the new Democratic trifecta, is that the federal administration has sprung an elaborate trap under them. We're going to have to come in and immediately have to make up a massive shortfall for all the decrease in federal spending on health just to keep Virginians alive. That's the first step, right? Shoring up these emergencies of our own creation, of the Trump administration's own creation. But the second step is something bigger than that, right? I suffer from a really serious back injury. I broke my back when I was on my second ship in the Navy. It was I was on my feet all day, and I went to the gym and abused my body even more, and eventually it gave out. That was debilitating. And it took a lot of work, a lot of time to be able to get to the point where I can function in a daily capacity again. And even now that I'm not in the service, I still have to get these recurring spinal injections. Any one of those injections, the injection alone is almost $500,000. And that's not counting diagnostics, right? That's not counting imaging. That's not counting the really time-consuming process it took for them to figure out what the heck had gone on with my body. That, if I'm an HVAC technician, if I'm a roofer, if I'm someone who's on his feet every day and might have to buy my own insurance on the healthcare marketplace, that's career ending. And so much of that cost is getting added, not because of the cost of the equipment, although that's important. It's because we have to price in the premiums for HMOs. It's because we have to price in the premiums for these organizations that exist to deny you coverage. We have created in our government, in our laws, in our expectations of how this whole industry functions, the acknowledgement of a middleman whose whole job is to screw you. And we pay them billions of dollars, a multi-billion-dollar industry, maybe trillion. I don't have the numbers in front of me, right? I believe we can fundamentally get away from that system. We can have a system where we function directly as our own. I believe in a single payer system. And I think we have the political will now in this country because we're seeing just how morally bankrupt the alternative is.
I definitely wanted to rush over to jump back on right at the end because I wanted to signal loudly my support also for the single payer system. So the more folks who like that idea, the more likely it would be not only just to get voted on, but to perhaps pass. So I definitely would encourage folks who, like myself, in the fifth district, who like the idea of not having to worry about medical bankruptcy again, not having to worry about being denied care from a private insurance agent. Single payer will help out for that. So definitely encourage you, should you win, to keep up that good fight. And on other fights as well, like encouraging an economy that is flush with great paying jobs. To use a term from the Great Depression and the New Deal, how would you want to prime the pump?
Sure. So the 5th Congressional District, it's largely rural. It's a place that, I say this all the time, it is a place that a global economy has left behind, right? This is a place where we used to have thriving textiles. It's a place where we used to have furniture manufacturing. It's a place where we used to have a huge tobacco industry. And most of that is either gone or significantly diminished, but you still have the communities here. And people are mad about that, and they want to see progress. I think when we look at our economy, the biggest takeaway, I would say, is that we have gotten away from a human-centered, a human scale economy, and we look at the economy exclusively through a national lens. When we talk about what's the economy doing, has Donald Trump hurt the economy or is it strong? What we really mean is the one big line going up? What's the Dow Jones doing? And that doesn't capture what's going on, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, after we got past the initial slump, we saw a massive spike. So many billionaires across this country had their wealth multiplied. Did your wage go up though? Did mine? It didn't, right? Like on paper, if you just look at that one big line, it looks great. But for the human scale experience, nothing was touched. I think the first step in getting back to a human scale economy has to be recentering our financial incentives. We used to have a thriving savings and loan sector in this country. This is so wonky. This is so boring. I feel almost embarrassed about it. But a series of regulatory changes led to those collapsing. And now we have a world, like we've already talked about, where financial decisions are getting made by big, Boston, Silicon Valley, Wall Street-based private equity firms. They're the ones who get to pick winners and losers. We are looking at a major aeroponics farm. They grow microgreens, right? Like sprouts for your sandwiches. There's a huge farm, employs about 200 people down in Danville, and it's about to close. That's because this big venture capital firm who specializes in aeroponics, they announced, on a whim, our general strategy has changed on how we want to do this. We are going to prioritize this type of investment over this one. Sorry about your farm you just opened. You're going to close. And they can just write that off, right? Because the individual human lives, those jobs, the community itself, it's a line on a balance sheet. It's not a human being. It's not a thing with a beating heart. We used to have businesses get most of their financial support and their lending at the community scale. We have tools now that are government supported called community development financial institutions that I think can be empowered to fill the role that the savings and loans used to. I think this is a really important first step in figuring out how to build an economy that is actually focused on the human experience rather than, what the Dow Jones is doing.
I'm also curious because you are a veteran, you know your way around that sector of the government, the VA, helping veterans who have unfortunately gone down the way of homelessness. For Virginia, which is going to have a big amount of veterans in this state, how do you want to help out for them specifically?
Sure. So we need a VA that is well staffed and equipped to actually handle the amount of people who are hurting from injuries, both mental and physical, from our decades of war. And we have seen the administration do the exact opposite. There have been thousands of jobs cut under Doge, which John McGuire proudly was a member of the Doge caucus. He has overseen thousands of job cuts, hundreds of VA doctors, over 1,000 VA nurses, over 1,000 additional staff. We have 2 whole new VA hospitals that have finished construction in recent years here in Virginia that essentially aren't open because they don't have the staff. I talk with veterans who suffer from PTSD, who suffer from a host of issues in this community, and they'll tell me how they aren't able to get the care they need because it keeps getting interrupted. Every few months, they'll get a new letter saying, oh, we've had to change your primary care provider. Oh, this is your new specialist, because the system is stretched so thin that it can't serve people anymore. And, we talk about John McGuire being kind of an easy servant to his caucus. It's very clear he's like, the only thing people know about him is that he's a veteran, right? The only thing people know about him is he's a SEAL, because it's the first thing every SEAL's ever going to tell you about themselves. He desperately wanted a bill about the VA. He went to caucus leadership. He's like, I need a vets bill. Give me a vets bill. And the bill he brought adds a reporting requirement to the VA. That's all it does. The VA puts together over 30 reports to Congress every year. He adds one more. It's a paperwork drill that is likely going to increase costs on the government. The only new data point it adds is it requires them to provide income data for beneficiaries. The only reason you want income data for VA beneficiaries is if you want to start means testing it, is if you want to start kicking veterans off their care because of what they make. John McGuire is actively helping set up a system where we're kicking veterans off their health care. I don't believe that's what we owe our veterans. I think, if you're willing to stand up, if you're willing to take a bullet for this country, then you deserve a country that's going to stand by you when you need care on the back end.
Good, strong words right there at the end for a very important topic. And what I would like to do now, I like to turn it over to all my guests at the end who are running to give sort of their, not so much a stump speech, but more like an elevator pitch, a couple minutes as to why you should be voted for, not only in the Democratic primary, but in the future in the general. Why vote for Mike Pruitt?
Sure. We're in a crisis. We're in an economic crisis. We have a bigger gap between the rich and the poor than we've seen in a generation. And when you talk to people who are on the wrong side of that rift, when you talk to working class people across this big rural district, the thing you hear over and over, clear as day, is anger, right? People are angry. Working class people are angry. They're angry because they know that whether or not they agree on the causes, there's a boot on the back of their neck. They know that the Rite Aid down the street is fixing to close, and the next place they might get their prescription filled might be more than half an hour away. They know their wages haven't gone up in 10 years, even if their taxes have changed. They know that, that plot of land they own next door that they've always wanted their son or daughter to build their house on, it's not available anymore. It's going to be too expensive. They know that they have a new fee on their utility bill, on their cell phone bill, that they don't remember bargaining for, that they never agreed to, but they know damn well they're going to pay it at the end of the month. I think it's important that we have someone in Congress who understands that anger, who understands and comes by it honestly and can speak to that fire, right? We need representation that knows what it's like to get a letter from Virginia Child Protective Services in the mail. We need someone who knows or who's talked with communities where they've struggled with getting their brother or their sister into the rehab care that they need for the problems that they're facing because it's not covered under the plan that they're able to buy. We need people who know what it's like to sit up in bed and they haven't been able to get the care they need for their chronic pain or for the tinnitus going off in their ear, and they sit there every night in bed and it's all they can focus on, and they sit and they think about all the things that they can't afford and the things that are keeping them from the good life, and that pain doesn't go away until they want to put a gun in their head. That is the kind of anger and the kind of frustration that working class people across this country feel. And the truth is, I grew up in a working class community in Appalachia. I went and got a big fancy education, but to do that, I had to go back into the closet just to be able to serve our country under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Every step of my life has been about fighting and clawing and scraping to get through the door into a room where people like me aren't expected and aren't always wanted. That's the voice that people in this district want to see. People want to see a party that knows what it's like to stand up and frickin' fight for them. And that's what I hope to do.
A lawyer, veteran, UVA grad, running in 5th District of Virginia, Mr. Mike Pruitt, I want to thank you for coming on tonight, talking a little bit of politics and why you should run for Congress and when. I want to thank you again for coming on tonight, and I wish you great luck, and hopefully come on again in the future should you prevail or we get a debate going.
Yeehaw. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, sir. You have a great night. Now, this has been another great Shiz Who. Our guest tonight again, Mike Pruitt, in Virginia's 5th District, running in the Democratic primary. Viewers, I want to thank you for watching tonight. Definitely tune in for more action in the future as I get more and more candidates on in Virginia for those great political offices, because we're getting nearer and nearer to not only the primary, but the general election of the midterms this upcoming November. You guys get more involved. Stay tuned to Shiz Who. I hope you guys have a great night.